Hello again, everybody. This is Patrick Castillo with Intiva. Got Bobby here with Arctic Wolf, and we're here to talk to you about some more industry-specific stuff related to small, medium businesses.
Hey, the stuff we all care about. How does it apply to me? And I think it'll be a good conversation just to like declutter all of that. Like, what's the strategies against me and for me? The technology, the budget, the whole kit and caboodle there. So Patrick has a lot of experience in this realm,
Yep.
and so I think we'll kind of start with just understanding the industries as a whole, maybe.
Yep. So for context, Intiva's got about 2,500 clients, about 70,000 endpoints that we look over. So we deal with a lot of SMBs. And, some of the biggest threats that we see come from budgeting, frankly. You've got SMBs that don't want to pay for the security package, or you've got SMBs that don't want to pay for updating their Windows servers. We'll see servers that are 2009, whatever. And obviously, the first recommendation every time they get with us is, hey, you should update those like now, or at the very least, take them off your internet facing network. So that way they're not targets. But that budgetary restrictions is a huge component for all businesses, but especially SMBs, because they're focused on growing their business and not always as much on being the most secure that they can be.
That's a great point, and meeting you where you're at, right? We're not trying to uh, fall behind in any sense when you go into technology and security and growing your business, because it right. Cyber risk and cyber resiliency is kind of the entire business picture too. And with that, Antiva has a lot of data to back what you guys do, and more importantly, why you're doing it the way you're doing it, because you've got such a breadth of knowledge and experience with this industry of smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, and there's a lot of risk there too. Of hey, like 90% of all business is on that SMB side,
Yep.
and just understanding what the scope is. Hey, there's a lot out there, and how do we defend it? Well, it's just knowing where you're at and where we can get you to.
Yes. So, SMBs, small, medium businesses, are at one of the biggest risks when it comes to these kind of things. Because if you think about it, they represent at least 90% of business in the United States, and probably the world, but I'm going to just say the United States. And so that's typically any business with like under 500 employees is kind of what's considered SMB. Um, if you are a hacker, let's put on our hacker hats and let's think about it from their perspective. If I'm going to spend time developing scripts and malware packages and campaigns, why would I want to target 10% of the available versus 90% of the available? And a big analogy I like to use when it comes to this is, and some people may get mad when I say this, uh, Macs versus Windows. People like to say that Macs can't be hacked. Macs can 100% be hacked. But as a hacker, still with my hacker hat on, most people have Windows. Like Windows is the biggest market share when it comes to computers across the world. Why would I write a bunch of hacks for the smaller segment when I could write hacks for the bigger segment and just, even if, you know, I don't know the return on investment for most hacks, but let's just say it's 2%. If I send it to 1,000 Windows machines or 100 Macs because there's just fewer of them, 2%, I'm going to get, 20 on the Windows side. I'm going to get 2 on the Mac side. That's numbers, man.
That's a pretty good return on investment, which is a part of just knowing what is the goal, what's the incentive for these bad actors. Well, what's kind of the easiest route to go get that 2% success? Hey, it's targeting kind of these wide nets. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, like you mentioned, hey, we work within what we've got. And they know, hey, there might be restrictions, or you might not have a full-time cyber team like Patrick and I. That's where really you can inject and partner with folks like Intiva that know this.
Mm-hmm.
I can say, hey, here's your gaps. Here's where the Windows versus Mac conversation comes into play, because, right, both of them do get targeted,
Yep.
especially in, small organizations. It's, just a matter of how many times are they trying, and when will success happen for them if we don't have some of those defenses in play. So really, it's that path of least resistance. Bad actors are like you and I, right? How
Mm-hmm.
much work do they want to be put in and not be successful? Well, they want to put in, the most efficient amount of work and go get that 2% or whatever that magical
Yep.
number is.
And we've got several verticals, and by verticals we mean like types of business. And we've learned that certain types of business will lean towards Mac or Windows. Like, just a fascinating note, it feels like most churches lean towards Mac. Why? I'm not quite sure. I'm sure there's a reason, but I haven't dug enough in to find out why. But that just seems like a really common thing for churches. So hopefully most bad actors aren't targeting churches, so maybe that's another reason. That's just speculation, just throwing that out there.
Yep.
But like, if you want to target the automotive industry, you're going to look and see what the automotive industry is using, and then you're going to target what they're using. We've talked in previous segments on how these bad actors are treating this like a business. I bet you there are KPIs that these hackers are having to follow. They're having to get return on investments. Oh, you want to hire that, hot new hacker that's up and coming in the dark net? Well, you got to pay for them, and you got to do a return on investment. It's wild to think of it in those terms, but I am sure it is happening.
Absolutely. One story I can share, even personally. So my family member was trying to buy a vehicle, right? When you mentioned, hey, the auto dealer down the road, from one of these local shops. A couple months ago, they went through kind of a software level breach of what the automotive industry uses for their day-to-day business. This breach took down the automotive industry with the company, the tools that they used, and they literally turned my family member away to say, "I'm sorry, we can't actually sell you this vehicle today," and it was that way for multiple days. So you just realize, right, the different tools and systems. As much as we can go in, there's a lot of flavors and options out there. There's vulnerabilities abound.
Mm.
And ways to get it. And I think another perspective, Patrick, you mentioned, is there's relationships, there's vendors, there's third parties involved, which was how this hacker or this bad actor actually got to this small automotive company. But it then can impact the others, right? When they're trying to send an email or access this. And right, industry base, they're all in target, in scope.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different even strategies. When you mentioned, hey, there's churches, there's automotive places, there's banks, there's, keep going down the list, all vulnerable. And as we see kind of the adoption of advanced strategies and the use of AI, it'll try to get more targeted, is what we're seeing.
Yep. And you mentioned third party throughout that. And that's one of the other big threats for SMBs, because typically you're not doing a lot of stuff in-house. You're doing third parties for some things. And if you compromise a third party that 1,000 SMBs are using, well, then you potentially compromised 1,000 SMBs depending on how they have it all set up. So having to think about what vendors have access to my data, thinking about if you're any kind of dev company, where am I getting my repository of code? Is it secure? There's a lot of different things to think about, and that's why I have to bring in these experts. These guys know what to look for. It's just it's crazy. You can get compromised 2 links down the chain. So like, say that this doesn't happen, but just as an example, we are using some company that provides coding assistance for a particular project. That company is using some public repo as the basis of their code. If that public repo gets a backdoor put into it, and then they use that code to make our project, well, then we just got compromised from the fourth party involved. So it's knowing, especially for your critical vendors, what they are using and that they are following proper security protocols. So it's a whole web.
It is a web. And to even boil that down, it's, hey, if I text Patrick and I need something from him, and for example, he gets hacked, he can't give it to me, I'm going to have to go to someone else to ask what I need from Patrick. On the business terms here, if you're operationally down or not secure or putting me at risk, I might go to someone else for my assistance, my help. So you can even take a gut check of what happens if one of my relations, the vendors, the parties I work with, I'm down, or I potentially am a chain or an impact to their business negatively. What is the relationship going to be like between us?
Yep.
Can we continue to survive if we were to lose this relationship? What's that impact? Right. And that can be a scary conversation when you start to say, do we have the ability to secure ourselves in order to continue our relationships, our business? And all of a sudden you realize this is important.
Yeah, and this kind of a final note directly related to what you're saying. SMBs it feels like it's much more than the big companies have to deal with their reputation and their relationships, as you kept saying. Like, especially your local reputation if you're of that scale. If you're known in the city as let's just say a cupcake shop, I guess. They've got great cupcakes. Go buy their cupcakes. Cool. Well, then next week you've got this. Hey, if you swipe your card there, it might, you might lose your data because they just had a breach about all the credit cards they've been processing. People probably aren't going to want to come to you because cash is not the king it used to be, and they're not going to want to use their cards there anymore.
Or
That's a very small scale.
if I get sick from your cupcakes, I'm going to have a pretty interesting reaction to wanting to go back there again.
Yep.
That's that same concept you're mentioning.
Yep. And this can happen for all kinds of business. You're looking at some of the clients we deal with are like contractors. They can be construction contractors, they can be government contractors, whatever. If they get compromised even once, well, that's going to hurt their chances because whenever you're going through these contracting gigs, you have to fill out like due diligence paperwork and RFPs, request for proposals. And sometimes in those questions is, have you been breached in the last 12 months? Well, if you say yeah, because if you have, please say yeah, don't lie. You're less likely to get that contract, just frankly, because would you trust your data with someone that got compromised in the last 12 months? I probably wouldn't.
Absolutely. It plays the same way as we can talk about the tech, we can talk about that side of every strategy out there, but hey, internalize it. How does this reflect to me if this happens? And it's tough conversations to have. And it's kind of the answer is, hey, let's get visibility. Let's understand what's at risk and meet you where you're at with it.
Yep.
I think that's kind of the goal here too, Patrick.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank everybody for coming and listening in.
Awesome. See you next time.